poor girl texted the CEO by mistake. Hours later, the hospital called him about a baby in her name. Rebecca Clark huddled under the bus shelter as rain pounded the metal roof, each drop an exclamation point on her miserable day. At 26, she clutched her second-hand phone tightly, its cracked screen illuminating her exhausted face in the early evening darkness. The hospital discharge papers in her bag felt impossibly heavy, much like the weight of uncertainty crushing her chest. 1 year ago, she had been an administrative assistant at Westbrook Innovations, working tirelessly to save for nursing school while supporting herself. Now she was unemployed, alone, and facing the most challenging circumstance of her life. The doctor's words still echoed in her mind. Bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Any additional stress could endanger both you and your baby. With trembling fingers, she typed a message to her friend, Tina. Just left the hospital. Doctor says I need complete bed rest or risk losing the baby. Can't work anymore. No insurance since I left Westbrook. Don't know how I'll make rent next week. Could I possibly stay with you until I figure something out? Rebecca hit send and watched the loading icon spin. When it changed to delivered, she exhaled shakily and tucked the phone into her coat pocket. The last bus of the evening approached, its headlights cutting through the rain. As she climbed aboard, paying with her dwindling cash, she didn't notice that her message had been delivered to the wrong number, 1 digit off from Tina's. Across town in the penthouse office of Westbrook Tower, Nathan Westbrook was reviewing quarterly reports when his personal phone buzzed. The 38-year-old CEO rarely received texts on this number, which he kept private from all but close friends and family. Glancing at the notification, he frowned at the unfamiliar number and unexpected personal message. Nathan had built Westbrook Innovations from a small tech startup into a medical equipment company that now employed over 500 people. Known for his brilliant business mind and reserved demeanor, few saw beyond his professional facade to the man who quietly donated substantial sums to local children's hospitals and education programs for underprivileged youth. He read the message twice, realizing it clearly wasn't meant for him. His thumb hovered over the screen ready to ignore it when something in the desperate tone gave him pause. The mention of Westbrook caught his attention. This person had worked for his company. His usual practice was to delegate such matters to human resources, but something about this situation felt different. After a moment's hesitation, he typed, I believe you've texted the wrong number, but I noticed you mentioned Westbrook. I'm Nathan Westbrook. If you're a former employee facing medical difficulties, I might be able to help. On the bus, Rebecca's phone chimed. Expecting Tina's reply, she instead found herself staring at a response that made her heart drop into her stomach. Nathan Westbrook, the CEO himself, the man whose office she had glimpsed only from afar during her year at the company, whose signature had been on her paycheck, but who had never known she existed among hundreds of employees. Oh my God, she whispered, drawing a curious glance from an elderly woman across the aisle. Her fingers froze over the keyboard as mortification washed over her. Of all the wrong numbers in the world, she had accidentally texted her former boss, a man worth millions who surely had better things to do than read her desperate problems. After several attempts at drafting a response, she finally replied, Mr. Westbrook, I'm so sorry for the misdial. This is Rebecca Clark. I worked in administrative support last year. Please ignore my message. It was meant for a friend. Nathan recognized the name vaguely. He prided himself on knowing as many employees as possible, but the company had grown too large for him to know everyone personally. He considered letting the matter drop. Her embarrassment was evident in her response, but something about her situation troubled him. Medical issues, pregnancy, no insurance, housing insecurity, all problems he had the power to address. No need to apologize, Miss Clark, he typed back. If you're facing medical issues and financial hardships since leaving Westbrook, our former employee assistance program might help. Would you be comfortable sharing more about your situation? Rebecca read his message as she unlocked the door to her small studio apartment in the less desirable part of the city. The heating was temperamental, the furniture second-hand, but it had been home for the past 2 years. Now even this modest sanctuary was at risk. Pride told her to decline his offer, but her hand instinctively moved to her 5-month pregnant belly. This wasn't just about her anymore. I left Westbrook last year to pursue nursing school part-time while working at City Hospital in administration, she explained. I'm expecting a child in 4 months. There have been complications requiring bed rest, meaning I can no longer work. Without income, I'll lose my apartment. I didn't realize former employees could still access assistance programs. Nathan read her message and immediately opened his laptop, searching company records while calling his head of human resources despite the late hour. Their conversation was brief but productive. When he returned to his phone, he had a clearer picture of Rebecca Clark, exemplary employee, well-liked, resigned on good terms to pursue education. Nothing in her work history suggested someone looking for handouts. "Our extended care program can help," he wrote. "It covers former employees facing medical emergencies within 2 years of employment. I've notified HR to contact you tomorrow. In the meantime, is there anything urgent you need tonight?" Rebecca stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. Was this really happening? Had her misdirected text somehow connected her with exactly the help she needed most? It seemed too convenient, too miraculous to be real. Part of her wondered if this was some elaborate scam, but the message had come after she texted the wrong number. No scammer could have engineered that. "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook," she replied. "I'm overwhelmed by your kindness. I have enough for tonight, and knowing HR will call tomorrow is an enormous relief." Nathan set his phone down, feeling strangely invested in this former employee situation. It wasn't like him to become personally involved in company assistance cases. But the timing of her accidental message seemed almost fated. Before he could analyze his unusual interest further, his phone rang. Not a text this time, but a call from an unknown number. "Nathan Westbrook speaking," he answered. "Mr. Westbrook, this is Nurse Jenkins from City Hospital. I'm calling about Rebecca Clark. You're listed as her emergency contact, and there's been a situation regarding her pregnancy. We need you to come to the hospital immediately." Nathan frowned, confusion evident on his face. Emergency contact. He had just spoken with Rebecca minutes ago, and she hadn't mentioned any immediate crisis, nor could he imagine why she would have listed him, of all people, as her emergency contact. Something wasn't adding up, but the urgency in the nurse's voice was unmistakable. "I'll be there right away," he said, already reaching for his coat, unaware that this unexpected call would be the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. Nathan drove through the rain-slicked streets towards City Hospital, his mind racing with questions. Why would Rebecca Clark list him as her emergency contact? They'd exchanged only a handful of messages, and before tonight, he couldn't have picked her out of a lineup of employees. Something wasn't right. The hospital's emergency entrance was bathed in harsh fluorescent light as he strode through the automatic doors. At the front desk, he introduced himself, explaining the nurse's call about Rebecca Clark. "Oh, Mr. Westbrook." The receptionist's eyes widened with recognition. "Nurse Jenkins is expecting you. 3rd floor maternity ward." Maternity ward. The elevator ride gave him time to process his confusion. If Rebecca was 5 months pregnant as she'd mentioned, why would she be in maternity? It was far too early for delivery. Nurse Jenkins met him as the elevator doors opened, a stern-faced woman with compassionate eyes that had seen everything in her 30 years of nursing. "Mr. Westbrook, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, leading him down the corridor. "I should clarify the situation. We found your business card in Miss Clark's wallet listed as her workplace. When we couldn't reach her emergency contact, someone named Tina, whose phone seems to be off, we tried your company's after-hours line. Your security desk connected us directly to you." "I see," Nathan said, relief mingling with renewed concern. At least that explained why they'd called him. "What's happened to Miss Clark?" "She collapsed at her apartment building. A neighbor found her unconscious in the hallway and called 911. She's stable now, but her blood pressure was dangerously high, putting both her and the baby at risk." Nathan followed Nurse Jenkins to a private room where Rebecca lay sleeping, an IV in her arm and monitors beeping steadily beside her. She looked different from what he'd imagined, younger, more vulnerable, her chestnut hair framing her face pale with exhaustion. A small baby bump was visible beneath the thin hospital blanket. "Will she be all right?" he asked quietly. "Dr. Miller wants to keep her for observation for at least 48 hours. The concerning part is what happens after discharge. She needs complete bed rest, proper nutrition, and regular monitoring. From what she told us before being sedated, she has nowhere to go and no one to help her." Nathan stood awkwardly at the foot of Rebecca's bed, feeling like an intruder in this intimate moment of crisis. He barely knew this woman, yet circumstances had thrust him into her life at its most vulnerable point. The responsible thing would be to ensure the company's assistance program helped her, then step back. That's what he told himself, even as he found himself saying, "I'll make arrangements for her care." The next morning, Rebecca awoke disoriented, memories of collapsing in her apartment building hallway flooding back. She'd been carrying groceries up the stairs when dizziness overcame her, the world tilting sideways. "You're awake," came a male voice she didn't recognize. She turned to find Nathan Westbrook sitting in a chair beside her bed, his laptop open on a small table, impeccably dressed even at, she glanced at the clock, 8 in the morning. He looked exactly like the executive whose photo hung in the Westbrook Innovations lobby, confident, polished, and entirely out of place in her hospital room. "Mr. Westbrook?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "What are you doing here? The hospital called me last night. Apparently, they found my business card in your wallet and reached out when they couldn't contact your friend." He closed his laptop. "How are you feeling?" Rebecca's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "The baby is fine according to the doctors, but they're concerned about your blood pressure and living situation." Embarrassment washed over her. Of all people to witness her at rock bottom, it had to be her former CEO, a man whose annual income probably exceeded what she'd earn in a lifetime. "I'm sorry they bothered you," she said, struggling to maintain dignity. "I'll figure something out." Nathan studied her, noting the stubborn pride in her eyes despite her circumstances. It reminded him of someone himself perhaps, in those early days when he'd refused help even when drowning in startup debt. "Rebecca," he began carefully, "I've spoken with Dr. Miller. You need 2 months of bed rest minimum with proper care and monitoring. The extended care program I mentioned will cover your medical expenses, but it doesn't address your housing situation." "I'll call Tina again," Rebecca insisted. Her phone was probably just off last night. As if on cue, her phone rang from the bedside table. Nathan politely stepped out of the room to give her privacy. In the hallway, he checked his messages. 22 emails from work, 3 texts from his sister Megan, asking why he'd missed their breakfast meeting. The company wouldn't run itself, yet here he was, inexplicably invested in an ex-employee's crisis. When he re-entered the room 10 minutes later, Rebecca was staring out the window, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "Tina can't help," she said without looking at him. "Her mother's moving in with her because of health issues. There's no space." She finally turned to him, vulnerability and determination warring in her expression. "But I'll figure this out. I always do." "I have a proposal," Nathan said, surprising himself. Westbrook Innovations owns several properties for visiting executives and clients. There's a fully furnished apartment near the hospital, sitting empty. As part of your extended benefits, you could stay there during your recovery. Rebecca's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly, it's a business decision," he continued smoothly, though they both knew it wasn't. "The company invests in promising employees. You left to pursue nursing education, a valuable skill set. Consider this an investment in your return to the workforce." "You want me to come back to Westbrook after nursing school?" she asked cautiously. "Our medical equipment division always needs clinically trained staff. It's good business." This was true but not his primary motivation, and something in her expression suggested she knew it. Before she could respond, Dr. Miller entered, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor who quickly assessed Rebecca's vitals. "Your blood pressure's still elevated," she informed Rebecca. "I'm keeping you another night, and we need to discuss your care plan." She glanced at Nathan. "Mr. Westbrook, I understand you're arranging accommodations." "Yes. A company apartment near the hospital." Dr. Miller nodded approvingly. "Good. Miss Clark will need someone checking on her regularly, perhaps a home health aide." "I've already contacted our HR department to arrange it," Nathan said, his executive efficiency kicking in. Rebecca's head was spinning, and not from her medical condition. Yesterday, she'd been facing homelessness. Today, the CEO of her former company was arranging housing and healthcare as casually as ordering lunch. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked after Dr. Miller left. The truth, not the business justification. Nathan paused, considering her question. Why was he so involved? Was it guilt over his company's inadequate support for former employees, simple human compassion, or something more personal he wasn't ready to examine? "Let's just say I know what it's like to face challenges alone," he answered carefully. "No one should have to do that, especially not when they're responsible for another life." What neither of them could have anticipated was how this moment of unexpected kindness would set in motion events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves, each other, and the thin line between professional assistance and personal connection. Nor could they have imagined that within hours, a revelation from Rebecca's past would emerge, threatening the fragile trust beginning to form between them. 3 weeks had passed since Rebecca moved into the company apartment. The spacious one-bedroom unit with its neutral decor and practical furnishings was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived, yet she decorated it. With small touches, a colorful throw pillow, a potted plant, and framed photographs to make it feel less temporary, less like charity. Following doctor's orders, she spent most days resting, her laptop her primary connection to the outside world. The home health aide, Maggie, visited every morning to check her vitals and bring groceries, becoming a welcome friend in Rebecca's isolated existence. What surprised her most was Nathan's continued involvement. She'd expected him to arrange her care and disappear back into his executive world, mission accomplished. Instead, he texted daily asking about her health with seemingly genuine concern. Twice a week, he personally delivered meals from her favorite restaurants, information he'd casually extracted during their conversations. On this particular evening, Rebecca was updating her online coursework when a knock sounded at the door. Maggie had a key, which meant it was likely Nathan. She smoothed her hair, acutely aware of her simple maternity dress and bare feet. "It's open," she called, closing her laptop. Nathan entered carrying 2 bags from Antonio's, an Italian restaurant she'd mentioned loving during college. "I hope you're hungry," he said, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "I might have over-ordered." "Starving," she admitted, awkwardly rising from the couch. Her growing belly, now at 26, made every movement a careful calculation. As had become their routine, Nathan unpacked the food while Rebecca set the table. These dinners had evolved from brief check-ins to lengthy conversations that often stretched late into the evening. Rebecca had learned about his childhood as the son of a single mother who worked multiple jobs to support him, his scholarship to business, school, and how he'd founded Westbrook Innovations with his mother's life insurance money after she passed away from cancer. In turn, she'd shared pieces of her own story, growing up in the foster system after her parents died in a car accident when she was 9, working her way through community college and her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse. What she hadn't shared was the full story of her pregnancy, a omission that grew more conspicuous as their friendship deepened. "I spoke with HR today," Nathan said as they ate. "They've drafted a return-to-work plan for after your maternity leave with flexible hours so you can continue nursing school." Rebecca set down her fork. "Nathan, we need to talk about this arrangement." He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "What about it? You've gone far beyond what any company would do for a former administrative assistant. The apartment, the healthcare, the job offer." She met his gaze directly. "I need to understand why." Nathan considered his response, something shifting in his eyes. At first it was simple corporate responsibility, then it became something else. "What?" she pressed. "I enjoy your company, Rebecca. These dinners have become the highlight of my week." His admission hung in the air between them, unexpectedly personal. The moment was interrupted by Rebecca's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen, and her face paled. "I need to take this," she said, rising awkwardly. She moved to the bedroom, closing the door, but Nathan could still hear her agitated whispers. "I told you not to contact me." "No. You can't just appear now." That wasn't the agreement. When she returned 10 minutes later, her complexion was ashen, hands trembling. "Is everything all right?" Nathan asked. "Just someone from my past," she said dismissively, though her voice quivered. "Nothing important." Nathan didn't press, but the atmosphere had changed. The easy companionship of moments before replaced with palpable tension. "I should go," he said, standing to clear the dishes. "You look tired." "Nathan." Rebecca caught his arm, her touch stopping him instantly. "Thank you for dinner and for everything else." He nodded, the gentle pressure of her fingers lingering even after she'd pulled away. The following morning, Rebecca woke to another text, not from Nathan, but from the number that had called the night before. "Need to talk about the baby. Meet me at Riverside Park at 2 p.m., or I go to your boss." Her heart raced as panic set in. How had he found her? Why now, after months of silence? She'd believed him gone for good after their last confrontation, when he'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the pregnancy. With shaking hands she called Maggie, asking her to come earlier than scheduled. When the aide arrived, Rebecca made a careful request. "Could you drive me somewhere this afternoon? The doctor said short outings are okay if I'm not walking or standing much." Maggie frowned. "Where do you need to go?" "Just to meet a friend at Riverside Park." After some hesitation, Maggie agreed, unaware of the turmoil behind Rebecca's request. At the park, Rebecca waited in the car, scanning the gathering area near the fountain. She spotted him immediately, Daniel, in the same leather jacket he'd worn when they'd dated briefly last year after meeting at a hospital fundraiser. 6 months older but otherwise unchanged, his handsome face still carried that charming smile that had once seemed sincere. "Wait here," Rebecca told Maggie, slowly exiting the car. Daniel's smile widened when he saw her approaching. "Becky," he said, using the nickname she'd always hated. His eyes dropped to her prominent belly. "So it's true. What do you want, Daniel? Her voice was ice cold. I've been thinking about things, he said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Maybe I was hasty before. That's my child too, and I have rights. Rebecca almost laughed. Rights after you told me to take care of it and disappeared. People change. He shrugged. I heard through mutual friends that you're living in some fancy apartment now, getting special treatment from your old boss. Seems like your situation has improved. The implication was clear, and disgust rose in Rebecca's throat. You think I'm getting special treatment from Nathan? And now you want a piece of whatever you think I'm getting? I'm just saying, if there's some rich CEO in the picture, maybe we can all benefit for the baby's sake. Before Rebecca could respond, a familiar voice came from behind her. I thought I might find you here. She turned to see Nathan standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Her heart sank. How much had he heard? What must he think of her now? Nathan, she breathed. How did you? Maggie called me, he said, eyes fixed on Daniel. She was concerned. Now I see why. Daniel straightened, assessing the well-dressed man before him. You must be the CEO. I'm Daniel Reed, the baby's father. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. The secret she'd avoided discussing with Nathan now exposed in the worst possible way. Nathan Westbrook, Nathan replied coolly, extending his hand with impeccable manners that did nothing to disguise his obvious contempt. I believe Rebecca was just leaving with me. We're having a private conversation about our child, Daniel countered, not taking the offered hand. No, we're not, Rebecca interjected. There's nothing to discuss, Daniel. You made your position clear months ago. Things change, Daniel insisted, stepping closer, especially when circumstances do. Nathan moved subtly between them. Miss Clark needs to return home. Her doctor has restricted her activities. Whatever you need to discuss can happen through proper legal channels. Daniel's charming facade slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. Legal channels? Interesting you should mention that. I wonder how your board would feel about your special interest in a former employee carrying another man's child. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air, a grenade with its pin half pulled. Rebecca felt her blood pressure rising dangerously, spots dancing at the edges of her vision. This confrontation was exactly what her doctor had warned against. Nathan, please, she whispered, swaying slightly. I need to leave. Nathan immediately wrapped a supportive arm around her waist, his focus entirely on her well-being. The car's just over there, he said gently. As they turned to leave, Daniel called after them. This isn't over. I have rights, and I'll exercise them unless we can come to some arrangement beneficial to all parties. Nathan paused, turning back with cold precision. Mr. Reed, I suggest you consider very carefully before making threats or demands. You'll find I'm not easily intimidated, especially by someone abandoning their responsibilities. In the car, Rebecca finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I should have told you about him, about everything. You don't owe me explanations about your personal life, Nathan said quietly, though his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I do when you've done so much for me, she countered. Daniel and I dated briefly last year. When I told him about the pregnancy, he wanted nothing to do with it, said he was moving to Chicago for a job opportunity. I never expected to see him again. And now he's back because he thinks there's money involved, Nathan concluded, his voice tight with anger. He threatens when he doesn't get his way, Rebecca admitted. At the hospital fundraiser where we met, he seemed different, caring, thoughtful. It wasn't until later I discovered how manipulative he could be. They drove in silence for several minutes before Nathan spoke again. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty. He hesitated. Is there any reason at all that I should be concerned about your safety or the babies with him in the picture? The question struck Rebecca like a physical blow. Memories of Daniel's escalating anger during their brief relationship rushing back. She'd never told anyone about the time he'd thrown a glass against the wall during an argument, or how his grip had left bruises on her arm when she'd tried to leave. Yes, she whispered, the admission breaking something open inside her. There is. Nathan's expression hardened into resolve. Then we have planning to do, and this time, you're not facing it alone. Neither of them realized that Daniel's reappearance was just the beginning of a chain of events that would test them both in ways they couldn't imagine, or that the hospital would soon be calling Nathan about Rebecca and her baby under circumstances far more dire than either of them anticipated. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations and security precautions. Nathan had arranged for Rebecca to meet with the company's attorney, Victoria Chang, who specialized in family law. Together, they documented Daniel's abandonment, his threatening behavior, and prepared restraining order paperwork as a precaution. "We won't file unless necessary," Victoria explained. Sometimes just having the documentation ready is enough leverage. Nathan had also subtly increased security at the apartment building, adding a doorman who politely checked all visitors, a measure presented to Rebecca as a new building policy rather than special protection. Despite these preparations, Rebecca sensed Daniel wouldn't give up easily. His text messages alternated between romantic nostalgia, veiled threats and financial demands, each ignored per Victoria's advice. The stress affected Rebecca physically. Her blood pressure remained stubbornly elevated despite Medicaid ion adjustments. On a rainy Thursday evening, Nathan arrived at the apartment for their now ritual dinner, finding Rebecca attempting to hang nursery curtains despite doctor's orders. "What are you doing?" he asked, setting down the takeout bags and hurrying to take the step stool away. Nesting instinct, she admitted sheepishly, allowing him to guide her to the couch. "I needed to do something normal, something that wasn't about Daniel or medical concerns." Nathan surveyed the half-decorated nursery adjacent to the main bedroom, a crib assembled, changing tables stocked, and tiny clothes folded neatly in drawers. Rebecca had transformed the space into something personal and warm despite its temporary nature. "I'll hang the curtains after dinner," he offered. As they ate, Rebecca noticed Nathan seemed preoccupied, checking his phone frequently, and answering with unusual brevity when she attempted conversation. "Is everything all right at work?" she finally asked. Nathan hesitated, clearly debating how much to share. "There's been some discussion among board members about my involvement with your situation." Rebecca set down her fork. "Daniel contacted the board, didn't he?" "Not directly, but he reached out to Harold Winters, our senior vice president, with some creative interpretations of our relationship." Nathan's expression hardened. He implied improprieties in exchange for his silence. "Blackmail," Rebecca whispered, mortification and anger battling within her. "Nathan, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen." She pushed herself up from the table. "I should never have accepted your help. Maybe if I just talked to Daniel." "No." Nathan's voice was firm. "That's exactly what he wants. To isolate you, to make you feel like you have no options but him." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Rebecca, I've spent my life building Westbrook. I can handle board politics. What I couldn't handle is knowing I abandoned you and your child to someone who might harm you." The conviction in his voice silenced her protests. Over the past weeks something had shifted between them, evolving beyond professional assistance or even friendship into something neither had named but both felt. "What happens now?" she asked. "I meet with the board tomorrow." "I've already." His phone rang, interrupting him. "Excuse me. It's the office." Rebecca watched as Nathan took the call, his expression transitioning from annoyance to concern. When he ended the call, he looked troubled. "Daniel showed up at Westbrook headquarters this afternoon demanding to see me. When security refused, he created a scene claiming the company was helping me hide his child. Several employees overheard." "He's escalating," Rebecca said, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "Victoria thinks we should file the restraining order tomorrow." "I agree." Later that evening, after Nathan hung the nursery curtains and left for an emergency meeting with Victoria, Rebecca felt the first strange tightening in her abdomen. Having experienced Braxton Hicks contractions before, she initially dismissed it. But when the sensation returned with increasing intensity and frequency, concern bloomed. By midnight, the pain had become unmistakable. Still a month and a half before her due date, Rebecca knew something was wrong. She called her doctor's after-hours line, described her symptoms, and was instructed to go to the hospital immediately. As the contractions intensified, she called for an ambulance, then texted Nathan, heading to hospital. Contractions. Something's wrong. The emergency room was chaotic when she arrived. A multiple car accident had brought in several trauma patients, stretching resources thin. A harried nurse took her information, checked her vitals, and looked alarmed at her blood pressure reading. "Preeclampsia," the nurse muttered, expediting Rebecca's admission. "We need to get you to labor and delivery right away." Everything moved in a blur of hospital lights, urgent medical terminology, and mounting pain. Dr. Miller arrived, her face grave as she examined Rebecca. "The baby's under distress, and your blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to perform an emergency C-section." "It's too early," Rebecca protested weakly. "We don't have a choice," Dr. Miller replied. "We're prepping the OR now." As they wheeled her towards surgery, Rebecca asked, "Has anyone called Nathan Westbrook? He should be here." She hesitated, not sure how to define what Nathan was to her. Not the father, not officially her partner, yet somehow the person she needed most in this moment. "We'll try to reach him," a nurse assured her. Nathan was in his car heading to the hospital when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Westbrook, this is Nurse Chen from City Hospital. Rebecca Clark has been admitted with severe preeclampsia and premature labor. They're preparing for an emergency C-section." "I'm 10 minutes away," he replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he arrived, he was directed to a surgical waiting area. The minutes crawled by tortuously as he imagined what was happening behind those closed doors. Was Rebecca afraid? Was the baby, her baby, going to survive being born so early? Finally, Dr. Miller emerged still in surgical scrubs. "Mr. Westbrook," she acknowledged. "Rebecca came through surgery. She's stabilized, but she'll need careful monitoring. And the baby, a little girl, 4 pounds 2 ounces small but fighting. She's in the NICU. We're watching her breathing carefully." Relief washed over him. "Can I see them?" "Rebecca's in recovery. She asked for you repeatedly during prep." Dr. Miller studied him carefully. "She'll be moved to a room soon. The baby will remain in the NICU until her breathing stabilizes and she gains weight." As Nathan waited to see Rebecca, a commotion erupted near the nurse's station. A familiar voice rose above the hospital's quiet. "I have a right to see my child," Daniel demanded, his face flushed with anger. "I'm the father." The head nurse was blocking his path. "Sir, visiting hours are over, and we have no documentation listing you as the father or as an approved visitor." Daniel spotted Nathan and changed direction. "You," he accused. "You think your money and influence can keep me from my child? I'll sue you in this entire hospital." Security officers approached as Daniel's voice rose. Nathan remained calm, standing his ground. "Mr. Reed, this isn't the place. Rebecca just had emergency surgery. Your child is in intensive care. If you genuinely care about either of them, you'll respect the hospital's protocols." "Don't lecture me about care," Daniel spat. "I'm filing for full custody as soon as possible. My attorney says I have a strong case, especially when the judge hears about the cozy arrangement you've had with Rebecca." Before Nathan could respond, a hospital security officer intervened. "Sir, we've called the police. You need to leave now." As they escorted a protesting Daniel away, Nathan felt a mixture of anger and profound sadness, not for himself, but for the baby girl who deserved better than a father who saw her as leverage. When finally allowed into Rebecca's room, he found her pale but awake. An IV delivering medication to control her blood pressure. "They won't let me see her yet," Rebecca whispered, tears in her eyes. "My daughter. They say I'm too unstable to go to the NICU." Nathan took her hand. "She's beautiful, Rebecca. I went by the nursery window on my way here. She has your chin." Rebecca managed a small smile. "Daniel was here. I heard him from my room." "He's gone now," Nathan assured her. "But we need to talk about next steps. Victoria's already working on emergency custody papers based on the documentation we gathered." "I'm so tired of fighting," Rebecca admitted. "All I wanted was to create a quiet, safe life for my baby. Instead, I've dragged you into this mess, jeopardized your company's reputation." "Stop," Nathan interrupted gently. "You didn't drag me anywhere. Every step I've taken has been my choice." He paused, gathering courage for what he needed to say next. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to take another step, a big one." "What do you mean?" "I want to be there for you and your daughter, not as your former boss, not as a friend helping in a crisis, but as someone who." He hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty. "Someone who has fallen in love with you." Rebecca stared at him, shock evident in her expression. "Nathan, you can't." "I can. I do." His voice was steady. "I've known it for weeks. Maybe since that first accidental text, I kept telling myself it was inappropriate that I was just helping an employee. But it's more than that. It's been more for a long time." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "The timing couldn't be worse. My life is in chaos. Daniel is threatening custody battles. Your board is questioning your judgment. The timing is what it is," Nathan said simply. "I'm not asking for answers now. I just needed you to know where I stand regardless of what comes next." 3 days later, Rebecca was finally strong enough to be wheeled to the NICU. With Nathan beside her, she held her daughter for the first time, marveling at the tiny fingers and determined scowl that already showed her fighting spirit. "Have you decided on a name?" Nathan asked. Rebecca nodded. "Hope. Her name is Hope." 1 month later, Hope was finally released from the hospital, thriving and strong like her mother. The apartment that had once been a temporary haven was now their home, at least until Rebecca completed her nursing degree. Daniel's custody threat had diminished after Victoria presented their documentation to his attorney, resulting in a supervised visitation agreement that he rarely fulfilled. As for Nathan and Rebecca, they were taking things slowly, their relationship evolving naturally, as they navigated the complex terrain between where they began and where they might be headed. On the 1-year anniversary of that accidental text message, Nathan took Rebecca to dinner at the small Italian restaurant they'd come to consider theirs. Hope, now a chubby, laughing 10-old, stayed with Maggie, who had become like family. Over dessert, Nathan reached across the table to take Rebecca's hand. "One wrong number changed everything," he said softly. "It's hard to imagine where we'd be if you hadn't mistexted me that night." Rebecca smiled, thinking of the long journey from that desperate evening at the bus stop to this moment of contentment. "Some mistakes turn out to be the best decisions we never knew we were making," she replied, squeezing his hand. As they walked home under a canopy of stars, Rebecca reflected on how a single message sent in error had somehow connected her with exactly the person she needed most, proving that sometimes destiny has a way of finding us, even when we dial the wrong number. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **